For Pacifica Radio, I'm Christina Onnested. Hearings investigating the deadly January 6th Capitol attack resumed today. Georgia's embattled Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger is among the election officials and workers set to testify about the famous phone call in which then President Donald Trump told him to find the votes needed to win the state. Other election officials will also testify about how they fended off Trump's pressure campaign to overturn the 2020 presidential election, at times despite frightening personal attacks. Trump's scheme included leaning on key battleground states to reject ballots outright or to submit alternative electors for the final tally in Congress. The pressure was fueled by the defeated president's false claims of voter fraud, which the panel says led directly to the riot at the Capitol. Today's focus will review how Trump was repeatedly told his pressure campaign could potentially cause violence against local officials and their families, but pursued it anyways, according to a select committee aide. Colombia will be governed by a leftist president for the first time after former jailed rebel Gustavo Petro narrowly defeated a real estate millionaire likened to Donald Trump. Petro's third attempt to win the presidency earned him just over half of the votes cast Sunday, 53% to 47%. Russia's President Vladimir Putin says he's beefing up his military capabilities. His comments were translated by Al Jazeera.
Priority is equipping troops with new weapon systems that will determine the combat effectiveness of the Army and Navy in the years and decades to come. In addition to the new weapons already tested, troops are receiving S-500 air defense and missile defense systems that are unmatched in the world.
The move comes as the U.S. and European nations continue to supply Ukraine with weaponry to defend itself against Russia's assault. Last week, the Biden administration announced an additional $1 billion in military aid to Ukraine. Meanwhile, Poland's foreign minister says the war in Ukraine shows Europe cannot defend itself without the United States. He made the comments at a gathering of Polish ambassadors today. The U.S. has deployed soldiers to Poland and is using the country as a hub for weapons going into Ukraine. The Kremlin says 2 Americans captured volunteering for Ukraine are not covered by the Geneva Convention and could face the death penalty. 2 of the 3 missing Americans were captured by pro-Russian separatists in the Donbass region. Alexandra Druki and Andy Tynok, who are both from Alabama. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky charged Russia with holding African nations hostage over its blockade of Ukrainian grain at the Black Sea port. That delay has caused a food shortage in several African nations that rely on Ukraine's grain. His comments come after European Union officials slammed the blockade as a war crime Monday. Abortion rights advocates are gathering outside the Supreme Court today in anticipation of the nation's highest court striking down rights to abortion access. A decision is expected any day now on a challenge to a Mississippi law that bans abortion. Such a ruling would overturn some 50 years of legal precedent under the landmark Roe v. Wade decision that legalized abortion access. Last week, the American Medical Association declared abortion bans a human rights violation. Newly released images from the Robb Elementary School shooting in Uvalde, Texas last month, obtained by the Austin American-Statesman, shows officers arrived 58 minutes before breaching the door where the gunman was holed up with children, and officers reportedly heard gunshots 3 times as they waited orders to go in. Images show the officers were heavily armed with assault-style weapons and even a large shield, in contradiction to the official narrative that officers were only armed with pistols and had to wait for backup. An 18-year-old gunman shot and killed 19 children and 2 teachers and wounded 17 others. Vice President Kamala Harris celebrated Juneteenth Monday with a surprise visit to school children at the African American History Museum. It celebrates the day, June 19, 1865, when Union soldiers arrived in Galveston, Texas, to order freedom for the enslaved black people in the state. It was 2 months after the Confederacy had surrendered in the Civil War and about 2.5 years after the Emancipation Proclamation ended slavery in southern states. Meanwhile, some Democrats used Juneteenth to call for prison reforms, noting slavery is still legal by means of cheap incarcerated labor. Mary Sherman reports.
Oregon Congressman Jeff Merkley and other members of Congress point out the need for worker protections for people who are incarcerated and often forced to work for very little pay.
We still have slavery in our 13th Amendment, a loophole that allows slavery to continue as a punishment for a crime and launch not just re-enslavement for hundreds of thousands of individuals, but also mass incarceration that continues to this day.
The average minimum wage for people in prison is 52 cents an hour. I'm Mary Sherman for Pacifica Network and Public News Service.
Israel's outgoing coalition government will fast-track a bill to dissolve parliament, setting up the country for its fifth election in 3 years. Prime Minister Naftali Bennett said Monday he would disband his alliance of 8 diverse parties. New elections are likely to be scheduled for October and raise the possibility that longtime leader Benjamin Netanyahu, who lost control as he faces corruption charges, may be able to stage a comeback. President Joe Biden says he's considering a halt of the federal gas tax. It could possibly save consumers as much as 18 cents a gallon. Rail strikes in the United Kingdom are underway for the next 3 days. Up to 40,000 cleaners, signalers, maintenance workers, and station staff are expected to walk out of the job, disrupting public transit. The dispute centers on pay and job security at a time of soaring inflation. I'm Christina Onnested reporting for Pacifica Radio.